Right, hi lads and lasses, and welcome to Darts Coaching with Dynamite Dave. Today's video I'm hoping will be a nice interesting one for you. It's going to be a bit of a waffle fest, which is what I used to do many years ago. I'd do the whole video in one take. This isn't going to be quite in one take, but we're going back down that sort of line for this video. And what we're going to have in this video is we're going to be probably a few sections in it over the next few days. It'll come out in 2 or 3 legs, so there's a pun for you. 2 or 3 legs to make up a set. that's the way that it's going to come out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a little bit of a, as I've said, a waffle fest about the way I see things, about the way my approach is to darts and my thinking on darts, my thinking on the game, my thinking on the way that I believe is the correct way to throw darts, which is being proved over the last decade now, because the channel's coming up to a decade old, and it's just gone from a tiny little acorn into a massive oak tree, and loads of people are now throwing in the Dynamite Dave way, for the simple reason is it works, and I believe that it's the future, and so do loads and loads of people who are throwing in the Dynamite Dave way. If you look back at the last video that was done, which was the Bomb Squad final, so that was like the grand final, it was the final of the playoffs between Callum Reston and Jason Hiscock, which is the Hitman. You will see both of those players are the Dynamite Dave players. They're both part of the Bomb Squad and they're both part of the Dynamite Dave inner circle. And you will see that that is the type of level that you can get to. And above. I mean, if you're prepared to put the dedication in, you're prepared to put the legwork in, I absolutely guarantee you that the Dynamite Dave way will work for you. If you want to get some coaching, before we actually get into the main body of the video, if you want some coaching, it's dead simple. Just Google Dynamite Dave, send me an email, dj.llewellyn123@outlook.com. That's dj.llewellyn123@outlook.com. All the information will be in the description below. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on TikTok. So I'm about everywhere. So if you're interested in having a look at the Dynamite Dave way, if it's the first, then go onto my channel. So it's in the top right hand corner of your page there. Click on my logo. That'll take you to my channel. Watch the introduction video, very important that. Have a watch of that and it'll give you an whole idea of what Dynamite Dave's all about and how it all works. Then click onto the videos, go and have a look back in the archives. If you want to find anything specific, so let's say the mechanical throw, which is what I call the throw, or the stance, or maybe even finishing, then it's dead simple. All you do is type it in the search box in the top right hand corner. Dead easy. Right, so let's get on with the main body of the video. The main body of the video is the way that I view darts, and the way that I viewed darts, which changed dramatically when I spent the 2.5 years developing the Dynamite Dave way. The way that I looked at darts prior to that was probably the same way as you look at darts now. And this is the way that everybody that I know of my age, not the young youth that are coming into darts, because in the old days what we used to do was you would either, if you were young like I was part of a darting family. When you were young, all you were done was you were given a cheapo set of brass darts, and basically all you did was you just flung them at the board. You did it in whichever way you wanted to, and whichever way you thought that those darts should get to the board. And let's face it, back in I would imagine from the 1930s, if you've seen some of those films, you will have seen what even at today's standards, or even 10 years ago standards, was the ridiculous throws that they had. Their arms were gyrating all over the place, they were hopping up in the air as they threw the darts, and basically it was just a matter of how do you get that dart to the board, and you just did it whichever way you wanted to. Even as stupid as I've actually seen players in the old days of the 1920s and 30s actually taking a bit of a run up to throw the dart. Whereas we've progressed on from that massively to today. But I still believe right the way up until I actually started to think about how human beings throw darts and how the most efficient way to get the dart to the board is, I believe the same thing. I just threw the darts at the board. I did what probably a lot of yous out there have done. I tried the Eric Bristow way, I tried the John Lowe way, Jockey Wilson way, Keith Deller. I went through loads and loads of different throws, but the thing that you've got to think is Keith Deller's throw is Keith Deller's throw. In the old days, John Lowe's throw was John Lowe's throw. It worked for John Lowe, it didn't mean that it would work for you. So, what happened to me? Well, I started off basically just being a walk backwards and forwards dummy for my brother, but I still liked the game, but I was crushed all the time for the simple reason is I was stood there at the side praying that our kid didn't hit a 60 so I stood a chance. But as you can probably imagine, that didn't happen very often. It's very rare I even took a leg off him, never mind a set or a match or anything like that. That was just absolutely a non-starter. So I played darts right the way up until we came to the place where we live now, which is Hyde. Where I was a little place called Hattersley, just outside of Hyde. I played up until getting to Hattersley, and then during me formative years of my early teens, obviously your attention changes then from darts to women and cars and motorbikes as you get to that sort of age. So what happened was I went away from darts, didn't pick a set of darts up for, well, what must have been 25 years. About 25 years I didn't pick a set of darts up. And I came back to darting really purely by accident more than anything, because obviously I watched the darts on the telly and the missus. We really enjoyed watching darts. My son, who I actually bought the dartboard for, which is the part of the story we're getting to, he used to sit in his little bouncy chair and he used to love watching the darts. He used to go mad when they scored a big score and the caller would shout 180 and the crowd would go mad. Then he'd go mad, he'd start bouncing up and down in his chair and what have you. So he must have had half an idea of what was going on, even though he was probably only 6 months old. But yeah, we loved darts and we watched it, but I never played it. We never had a dartboard up in the house. And we got to a point where my eldest son had moved into his own house, and we were thinking about what we could buy him for his birthday. And we came up with the idea that we would get him a dartboard cabinet, a dartboard. You can buy the kits, can't you? It was like a kit. I think it was just a windmill board with a cabinet, and 2 sets of darts came with it. So his birthday come, we went up to his house, we put it up, so we got all the measurements and everything, put the dartboard up to the right height, and half an hour later that was me hooked again. I fell in love with it again. Me and him were both garbage, to be honest with you. The pair of us were rubbish. So we were just chucking the darts at the board and what have you, and I found myself going over to his house just to play darts. I used to really look forward to the weekends to going to visit him so as I could actually have a game of darts. And then what happened was I bought myself a dartboard. Now my good lady, which was just one of the things, she didn't want a dartboard in the house because of the banging on the wall. I put a dartboard up in the man shed, was playing in there, not happy, as I'm sure all of yous are the same, or have been the same at some point or other. I just knew that I could be a lot better than I was, and I was absolutely trash. I was like 35, 40 average, if I was lucky, and that was on a good day. A 40 average was a really good day for me. So the darts wouldn't go where I wanted them to. I couldn't hit the doubles to save my life. And being an engineer, I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way of throwing darts. There's got to be a right way. And if there's a right way to kick a football, there's a right way to throw a dart. If there's a right way to hold a javelin or a snooker cue or anything, then there's a right way to hold a dart. There's got to be. There's got to be a physically and a logical way to actually deliver a dart to a board. So that was the acorn that went in. And then I tried a few things, got myself a little mirror in the actual man shed, stood up at that, had a few throws at the board and what have you, tried to look at myself, but it's very difficult to watch yourself while you're chucking. And it just happened that thingy, I fell ill, I was off work for a few weeks, and in the first week of it, I was watching the old Discovery Channel. Just happened to be while I was sat watching it and feeling sorry for myself and a bit poorly, came on this fantastic video, and it was about splitting arrows. So if you remember back to Robin Hood's days, if you remember Robin Hood riding through the glen, there was a series, I think it was, or yes, I think it was a series and a film, and part of the opening titles of that film was Robin Hood firing an arrow into a tree and then firing another one into the back of it and splitting the arrow in two. And I thought to myself, well, there's ultimate accuracy for you. And what happened was this Discovery programme was some university kids in America. And what they did was they set out to try and reenact being able to fire one arrow into the back of another one, but do it consistently. So not just one into the back of the other as a fluke, but something that could be determined and delivered and done on purpose. So first of all, what they did was they got a top-line professional longbow archer. They were out in a field, they had a standard archery target up with the circles going in and in. He fired into that and he got into the inner circle on several occasions, but the closest he got from one arrow splitting another arrow was probably 4 or 5 centimetres or a couple of inches. So that was considered to be a failure. So then what they did was they went back to the university, they sat down and they did drawings of bows, and they got a consultant in who was an Olympic archer. So modern technology, modern bow, the ones with the wheels on them and what have you, so obviously they're a lot more accurate, they've got a lot less kickback on them. He said was, he went and had a go at it, so I'm jumping the gun a little bit, he went and had a go at it and he was a little bit better but not much, to be honest with you. He got into the circle, I think he clipped, he had about 8 or 10 lots of arrows, and he clipped the arrow that he'd fired in, he clipped one of them, but I think that was when he had 6 or 7 in the actual target itself, and he clipped one of the ones that was in the bullseye. So again, that is a little bit of, or quite a lot of, luck rather than judgment, because I don't think he was aiming for any particular arrow. So that's what happened there. And anyway, they went back to again, classed it as a failure, went back to the university, and what they did was, the chap from the Olympics and them, as they were firing ideas around themselves, one of them said, what happens if we put it on a frame? So we take all the human element out of it, so we take all the human muscle element out of it and make it so it's more mechanical. And that's when the light came on for me, more mechanical. I thought, that sounds familiar to me. But as soon as they mentioned mechanical, I thought, well, obviously that's mechanical is far more accurate. And as they're talking, I could see an hammer with an hole drilled through the handle of it, put a bolt through that on a frame, and every time you push that hammer forward, it hits the same spot every time. If you put the hammer in your hand and start just whacking at the nails, you're going to miss them half the time. And I thought to myself, I've known this because I've done a bit of DIY myself, so I know how difficult it is to hit a nail on the head with quite a small hammer, especially when you're doing panel pins. I know how difficult that is. And I thought, well, yeah, that's starting to make some sense now. And then what they did was, the next suggestion was that they took it into a dead air space. So the angle that they chose was specifically for dead air. So what they did was, when the doors and everything in this hangar was shut, they were all hermetically sealed. It was quite a big area, this. It was I'd say probably half the size of a football pitch. And what they did was they started off, they wheeled the bow in on this mechanical gurney thing, and they set it up, and they fired the standard wooden arrows with goose feather feathers on the back of them and what have you, and they did actually manage to hit the arrow. What they put a single arrow in the target in the centre. So they fired one straight into the centre, and then they took all the other arrows out, so there was just one left in the middle, and they were firing at that one, and they managed to smash it but not split it, if you know what I mean. They managed to smash it a couple of times but not actually split it. So they went and they did like we did. We went from balsa wood darts with a lead ring round them and goose feather ends to what we've got now, which is a far more accurate and a far more technically competent piece of machinery. As in the barrel, the point, the actual stem and the flight are all solid. So there's very little that moves about on the actual dart itself through the air. So they did the same thing. What they did was they made the shafts for the arrows out of carbon fibre. They put high-speed steel heads on them, so high-speed steel arrowheads, and solid plastic, so basically like a dart flight. They put that as the actual flight for the arrow. They had something like, well, it looked like there was about 10 or 11 in the quiver, so they must have had 10 or 11 made at quite a lot of expense, especially carbon fibre. It must have been a lot of money in them days. So they had those made, they set it all up, and this was like the finale of the actual thing itself, the finale of the documentary itself. And they put one arrow in, so they put a wooden one in, so obviously they wouldn't trash the ones that they had that made very, very expensively. So they put one into the centre of the target, and they fired an arrow at it, got it, obviously aimed it, missed a little bit to the left, adjusted it, had adjusters on this thing, so they adjusted it and adjusted it and adjusted it, and then eventually they fired one right into the back of this wooden arrow. And then one of the, I would imagine he was a professor, turned around and said, right, put another one in and try and fire that into the back of the carbon fibre one. And it went straight into the back of it and smashed it to bits. So it was one of them, it was like a light coming on. And I thought, well, that is obviously the way forward, is a mechanical way of throwing darts that hopefully all humans will be able to replicate. So then the story moves on to me and a physiotherapist. What happened was I was dogged with a few problems with my knees in the early days, and I was talking to this lady physiotherapist about what I was trying to achieve, and she said to me straight away, there's two elements that you need to consider, and that is what grounds you to the floor, and that was what she said, what actually connects you to the floor. Your body position, so it needs to be neutral, and you need to have as least amount of working parts in that throw as possible. So those were the three elements that she talked to me about. She said to me, the most effective way for a human being to stand is with the feet shoulder width apart underneath their armpits. And she said to me, showed me a lot of the exercises that we do, a lot of this is how we start off. We start off with his feet shoulder width apart underneath us, and we do this and we do that. You must stand up straight. So and she that was where I get the thorax neutral from. So it's a massive thanks to Julia, and that's, I won't say a second name, but Julia, about thorax neutral, and about, she didn't come up with the arm movement or anything. She just said that you need to find a way of delivering the darts to the board that is ultimately repetitive and as simple as possible. The simpler you make it, the more repeatable it will be, and those were her words exactly. And that's the way that the Dynamite Dave way made its way into existence. So then what I did was, it was then 2.5 years in the thingy in the man shed there. I even got my old Action Man down out of the loft, believe it or not, from the well, I was born in 65, so it's probably from about 72, 73. and I'll never forget him. I've still got him up there. He's got the thumb thing on back for eyes to go from side to side. But what I did was I put him in poses, and I put his arm up, and if you remember, the Action Man had like a pin through the elbow, so as his elbow would move, and then he had like a socket that would move it that way. So it was absolutely ideal for what I wanted it to do. And I got it in the man shed. I cleaned everything out in the man shed, put a mat down so as I could stand him on. I took photographs of him. I made charts of my progression, of my thoughts about what I was thinking at the time, and I've got those diaries up in the loft somewhere of how it just developed from one thing to another, and it just progressed and progressed until the point where, now a lot of you might have already heard about this, and it was, I got to the end of the Dynamite Dave way. I was really happy with the way that I was throwing, and I was throwing phenomenally. In the man shed, which obviously out of everybody else's sight and what have you, I was throwing anything between 80 and 105, 106 average, depending. So it got to a point where, and it just happened to be one of those things, I was out in the pub, in a pub in Hyde, and two of the JDC players, I mean obviously I didn't know they were JDC players, I was just watching two lads playing at the board. I thought quite decent, these two, but if they tidied the technique up they'd be a lot better. So what I did was I went over and I said to him, I said, have you ever thought of the way that you actually throw darts? Do you think if you stood a different way and threw a little bit more in what I call the mechanical way? This is me talking to him in the mechanical way, and it was just like, well, who are you sort of thing. They weren't rude or anything, don't get me wrong. It was just like, well, you know what I mean, just a bloke in the pub trying to tell us how to chuck darts. So I said to him, I said, well, I'll tell you what then, what I'll do is I'll have a game against you. I'll throw in the way that I've developed, and they were all sort of like very sceptical at first, and then I opened up, I think, with something like, I think it was 140, 140, and I think I did a 12 or 13 dart leg. So you can imagine there was a little bit of effing and jeffing going on behind me. Who is this? This is unbelievable, this. So I spent half an hour with him, went through the technique and what have you, straightened them up a bit and improved the darts in half an hour, and that was for two of them. So never even thought about teaching it to people before, which you don't. I went back and sat down to my pint, finished the conversation with him, went sat down and started drinking my pint again. About 5-10 minutes later, one of the lads came over and he said, have you ever thought of making a YouTube video? So I just looked at him and I said, what's YouTube? So he said, oh wow. He said, yeah, let's get this sorted out for you. He said, you've got to go on YouTube. So he said, have you got a smartphone? So I said, yeah, of course I have. So I handed him my smartphone. So about 5 minutes later, he says, right, I've set you the YouTube account up. He says, I've put it onto your phone and everything. He said, just go into your shed. He said, film, just talk to your camera like you've talked to us. And that was the first ever video. I took it into the man shed and I started that first ever, what did I call it? Darts, Hints, Tips and Advice for Beginners for the first year or so, or 2 years it was called. And the rest is history, shall we say. Now a decade on, so it's best part of a decade now that I've been doing the YouTube channel, and we've gone from that little acorn all the way up to them. Well, it's not a massive oak tree, it's not a redwood yet, but it's getting there. And there's thousands of people across the world throwing in the Dynamite Dave way now. I've reached out and I coach people from Japan, China, Australia, America, the Netherlands, New Zealand. I mean, it's impossible to I have a load of people that I coach from all different parts of Ireland, all the parts of Great Britain, of course, Scotland. One of my things, you want to be, I reckon World Championship quality players comes from Scotland, one comes from America. But funnily enough, he's an English lad that's emigrated over there a few years ago, and he's doing really well. And so that's how the Dynamite Dave way got to being the Dynamite Dave way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call it a draw for this video, because it's been going on. This one will be it's been going about half an hour, I think, which is long enough for anybody. So that's the grassroots and where it actually came from. In the next video, what I'm going to talk about is the actual Dynamite Dave throw itself, the reasoning behind it, not an instructional video. You can see loads of them on the channel, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into what the actual mindset is behind it. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you found this entertaining as well as informative. And don't forget, lads and lasses, you will only ever get out of this game what you're prepared to put in. And it's the same with life, the same with work, the same with your relationships. It's as simple as that. And don't forget, lads and lasses, always, 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 toe to the hockey.